Hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn McSurdy. I am a first-year cardiology fellow at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and I have the pleasure of being joined today by Dr. Baggish and Dr. Jonathan Kim. Dr. Baggish is a professor of medicine at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland, and Dr. Jonathan Kim is a associate professor of medicine at Emory University School of Medicine, and also the director and founder of the sports cardiology program at Emory. And I have the pleasure of being joined by them today to talk about their recent study that they'll be talking about here at ACC, entitled Cardiac Arrest in Long Distance Runners from the years 2010 to 2023. So the first question that I have for you guys before we begin is, what is a little bit of the research behind long distance runners and cardiac arrest, and what sort of drove you guys to look into this and study this topic?
So first off, thanks for having us. I'll start a little bit with the background. It's actually a very personal story for me. It goes in parallel with how I got into medicine. And at a young age, I was running at a fairly high level and lost a close friend who was a very fit training partner from sudden cardiac death. And I had no intention of becoming a doctor until that event occurred. A pivot for me, went into medicine. And from a very, very early time, I was kind of obsessed with understanding why athletes would die. And so I started keeping a scrapbook when I was in medical school of sudden death events that occurred during marathons, because marathons were the other part of my life that I love. And fast forward a couple years, I joined the faculty at Harvard, and Jonathan, who was in his training there, came and we started talking about a project. And that led to the first RACER study, which was published in 2012. The first RACER study looked at the decade prior to that time. And what we did in that study is really set the bar in terms of understanding the incidence of the problem, and also came up with some very practical solutions that we thought would be helpful to reduce the magnitude of the problem. And those were simple. It was really just getting AEDs on race courses at the right locations and making certain that as many people as possible, including runners, knew CPR so that bystander CPR could be done for all that collapse.
And that leads to the next follow-up question. And first of all, thanks as well for having us. Why did we need to repeat the study? And the answer is actually pretty simple. We had 5 primary reasons. Number one, marathon participation has only increased in popularity. 13 million more compared to the last time we looked at this, so a total of almost 29 million runners over the last 13 years, I should say. Number two, we just talked about the fact that the first RACER suggested that we could improve a little bit. So we really wanted to see what the difference was. Number three, we wanted to see, has there been a change in terms of the epi as it pertains to causes? And then lastly, we did just go through once in 100 years pandemic. So what was the impact, or was there an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on outcomes of marathon runners?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I think, a lot of people obviously adopt these healthier lifestyles and they look into long distance running as sort of their pivot point in terms of adapting a healthier lifestyle. And it does bring into question, like, what is the safety? Are we prepared for patients or runners or participants who might not be as fit, or maybe have some type of underlying condition that's undiagnosed, and sort of how do we navigate that? So I think that I'm really excited to hear a bit more about the study for tomorrow. Do you guys have any recommendations in terms of, if you have a trainee or a medical student or resident of some sort who's interested in pursuing either similar types of research or a career in sports cardiology, sort of what are the hot topics and where can they start, and what just general advice do you have for them?
I suppose Aaron should probably start with this, but I got the mic first. So he certainly has been one of the pioneers in the field, and I became a sports cardiologist as one of his first mentees. But what I would tell trainees now, as the field has really exploded, is there's never been a better opportunity to get in the space of sports cardiology. Trying to find the right person to mentor you is really important. Trying to search out the education that's out there, and there's so much now through ACC, through the literature, et cetera. We were back in the day where a lot of what we did, we kind of just had to read up on our own. We had to figure out what was important and then kind of run with it. And be persistent. There's opportunities out there through ACC, acc.org, through our ACC Sports and Exercise Cardiology section, reaching out and trying to find these opportunities. Those would be my general pieces of advice.
Yeah, I would just build on that and say that really that there's never been a better time to go into sports cardiology. Most major medical centers around the country now have a program or will be starting a program shortly. And in those programs are mentors, people that really want to bring new people into the field. I guess the other thing I would say, and this applies to everyone at a training phase, whether it's sports cardiology or not, if you have an idea that you're excited about, go with it. I mean, look, this was a scrapbook that I started when I was a first-year medical student that turned into a first author New England Journal publication for my first and most cherished mentee, and now a second JAMA publication. So it's really great to just think about the power of an idea, even an idea that happens very early in your career.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing the story about the scrapbook. I think that, when I talk to a lot of people who've been successful within their fields, one of the common themes that I do hear is it starts with some kind of idea that they felt seemed either crazy or insignificant at the time. And then years later, it winds up turning into something much larger. So congratulations on both of the work that you guys have done. And just sort of the last question I have, if you have 1 to 3 bullet point takeaways for the audience from what you learned about your study, what would they be?
Well, number one, marathon running participation is safe. I think that's really important. However, it is also important to review your own health, your risk factor profiles, particularly as you get older, cardiovascular risk profiles, and ensure that you've talked through it with your physician. Doesn't have to be a sports cardiologist, but reviewing blood pressure, the basic stuff, cholesterol, family history. I think that's really important for those individuals who are seeking to engage in these type of events, but safe as mentioned. That's really important to emphasize.
Yeah. I'll just finish by emphasizing the safety aspect. It turns out, as you'll see from the data presented tomorrow, there's probably no better place in the world to have a cardiac arrest than on a well-run marathon course that has the right medical backup and the right medical plan. I think one of the things we're most excited about, and this needs to transfer forward, is that we've learned a lot about how to have these races be run and organized safely and successfully. And that really started with Racer 1, and I think will be codified with Racer 2. And it's just making the sport more enjoyable and safer for everyone.
Thank you guys for your time.